Yay. Okay, so my talk is titled The Browser as a Modular Networked Video Synthesizer. And everything I'm going to talk about is online in the form of sort of a code editor and graphics render at this website, hydraeditor.glitch.me. And this is sort of a tool I've been building, but really it's more of an investigation of three different things that might seem kind of separate: collaboration in the creation of live visuals, possibilities of peer-to-peer technology on the web, and feedback loops. And it's also become a platform for live coding visuals in JavaScript. So I'm going to start with a reference from the 1970s. This is the Satellite Arts Project by Kit Galloway and Sherry Rabinowitz. And what they did was using satellites, in 1977, they streamed video from 2 different places and composited them on top of each other. And what they said was that this marks the first time that the geographically dispersed electronic image was contextualized as a live, immersive place where artists and others could convene and co-create together on a scale that could be as cultural inclusive as desired. And so this is before the internet existed. This is just satellites, and they applied to get access to this satellite and to send video from one place to another. And it's sort of this utopian idea that as soon as, maybe if we just put 2 images on top of each other, we create this third place. It's not here, it's not there, but it's this other place that's some hybrid of these 2 places. And I want to stay here for a second because I think we still use this idea of a place in talking a lot about the web. It's a website, as if you're going somewhere, or it's an address, a web page. Just this idea that when you access a website, you're going to a place. And it's sort of this analogy that doesn't necessarily have that much to do with the underlying technologies. Like if I go to a website, my browser is sending a message to a server somewhere, that server is sending messages back to me, I'm sending messages back, but there's not that there's actually a place that I am necessarily. And then also this idea that it's live and immersive. I think Andres's talk was a good example of maybe we're just getting right now to this idea of a live, immersive place on the web. So I want to jump a little to now, which is, and talk about Webrtc, which is a browser protocol for streaming video, audio, and data directly between clients. So this means that now in the browser, we can be a little less dependent on a centralized server. The server here is this pink thing, or some way that all of these clients can talk to each other. But then Webrtc says that I can, as a client with the browser, directly send video, audio, and data to another person who's connected. And in this diagram, I'm sure a lot of people have seen it before, but it says maybe with these kinds of decentralized protocols, we can go away from the left-hand image, which is more a centralized network, and go towards the right-hand image, which is more of a decentralized network where lots of different people can connect and exchange information in different ways. And there's a lot of exciting projects, I think, being built on this type of protocol, called, for example, WebTorrent, Beaker Browser, the DAT protocol, and stuff like that. And I just kind of got interested in this protocol and started doing experiments, sending video, bouncing video around the internet. And as I was doing that, I sort of started to feel like this thing on the right of this network looked a little something like this thing, which is another reference from the 70s, because for some reason, a lot of my references are from the 70s. Maybe it's because I'm from San Francisco originally. But anyways, so what this is an analog video synthesizer. Basically, it's a bunch of boxes. Some boxes create a signal. By the time that signal gets to the screen on the right, the pattern of the signal creates a pattern. And the boxes are designed in such a way that many of the boxes can receive a signal and transform it. And then, so the order in which you connect the boxes will affect what comes out on the final screen. And this is similar in analog modular synthesis for audio, as well as analog modular synthesis for video. And so I thought, what if we kind of treat this thing kind of like this thing? Instead of thinking of a website as actually a place, what if we think about it as a bouncing signal that we can play around with? And so I started experimenting with this idea about 2.5 years ago or something. And so what this is basically, here I'm using Webrtc to send a video signal between various browser windows. So here I'm sending this and this video to this window and compositing them with each other. And then I'm sending this video and this video here and compositing them with each other over here. And these are all happen to be on the same computer to kind of show the idea, but they could be, you know, one window could be in China and one somewhere else, one here. But this is, I don't know why this was interesting to me. It was just, oh, let me explore this idea. And because I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, instead of actually making a user interface as I was experimenting with it, I just live coded in the console, kind of playing around with different things and seeing what happened just with this sort of routing video streams and throughout the internet. There we go. And so Daniel Sandin, the creator of that synthesizer that I was just showing, he said, the modules are designed to maximize the possibility of interconnection, thereby maximizing the number of possible modifications of the image. And so his idea is that the more of those boxes that you have in the modular synthesizer, the more you can route signals, maybe the more possibilities you have. So now I'm going to move into the tool that I've been building to experiment with this idea. It's called Hydra, and it's at that link I showed earlier called hydraeditor.glitch.me. And so it's designed to let people experiment with what I was just showing you, not just by sending video to different windows, but also just all within the same video, within the same window, I mean. And so I'm actually going to get rid of what's on the screen. And so the basic unit within this is an oscillator. Oops. Okay, so here we have an oscillator, which is like one of those boxes in the modular synth world. And then in order to see it, I need to connect it to a screen. So here's, I connected the oscillator to an output. And you can think of, in this case, this is a JavaScript library that I've created for working with this model of sort of video synthesis. And you can think of each function as if it's one of those boxes that we were seeing in the modular synthesis world. So now that I have an oscillator, I can give it certain parameters like frequency, sync, and also separate the colors somewhat. And then I can also start to transform the signal. So I can make it rotate. So here, I can make it rotate more. I can make it into a kaleidoscope, for example. Or I can pixelate it. And so here, sort of the analogies are each function is one of the boxes in the modular synthesizer. Each parameter is kind of like a knob. And then the chaining of the functions acts like the patching cables for people who are familiar with modular synthesizers. And this is interesting to me. This is all running on WebGL, and this chain of functions renders to a single shader. And I was interested, I think a lot of abstractions for dealing with graphics either talk about canvas, which use a lot of drawing metaphors. So there's a canvas, you draw a shape, you draw another shape. Or they use sort of 3D metaphors, like a lot of what we just saw, which is a box, lighting, and a scene. And so here I'm using this other metaphor, which is the video synthesis and transforming a signal metaphor. And so with this, if you want to repeat something, instead of writing a loop and saying, I'm going to do it now 100 times, I just apply a transformation. So here I could do repeat. And so I could do it 2 times. Or I could do it 200 times. And it's not more intensive for the processor at all, because they're just transformations to the coordinates directly on the graphics card, and the result outputs a pixel color. And so that's all well and good, but this is just sort of a single chain of things. And so what I was really interested in were that mess of cables and how things route into each other. And so what I can do here is I can have various sort of output screens. And so here, and I can also use different sources. And so I'm going to use my webcam here. So there I am. But actually, I'm going to put this over there and that over here. And so now I have my two screens, and I can then also blend them together. So I have one output called O0 and one called O1. So then I can now say, I'm going to use O0, and I'm going to blend it with O1, and then I'm going to output it to O2. And so then, there I am. And there's some different sort of blending operations here. Wait, I'll make this a little... and so one other thing that I sort of took from modular synthesizer, these are, what's happening now is I'm combining 2 colors, and the 2 colors of the 2 images on the left create the colors on the right. But I could also use the colors of one thing to affect the coordinates of the other thing. And so that in the analog world is called modulation. And so I can, if I do that. So now it's the colors of the thing on the top are affecting the coordinates of my camera. So it ends up with this kind of warpy thing. And so, hi everyone. I'm gonna repeat myself. And so this is just something I made this to experiment with, and and also back to the earlier image showing all the windows, still, if anyone else is connected to this website, I can use what they're doing as an input to what I'm doing, which is sort of just an experiment of what happens when we combine images in this way. And then some of the other things I've experimented with this is like using the screen as an input to itself and creating feedback and this sort of trippy thing. Or here I'm using my Twitter feed. So sources in the software can either be someone else who's connected, they can be a camera, it can be any browser window, or it can be any application window, or it can be a canvas element. And so here this is my Twitter feed with some video effects applied to it. Or this, I use a live stream of Times Square and a live stream of an aquarium, and then live coded the mix between the two. And this, for me, it's really just an ongoing investigation of trying something out and seeing what happens and trying something else out. And another experiment, this was using Chromium with no background. And so I could actually just use my desktop as input to this video synthesizer, but without having windows. So that was just a fun experiment, I think. And so one of the interesting things to me with this sort of setup is to be able to make it easy to experiment with feedback, which in the video world, feedback is where you have a camera and the output of the camera goes to a screen, and then the camera is looking at that screen itself. And so at some point there's no starting point because the image of the camera is on the screen, and the image of the screen is what's coming out of the camera, which is similar to recursion in programming or some of Escher's drawings, or in the 10th century, the snake that eats its own tail. So it's this idea of things that don't necessarily have a start. So I'm going to show a very quick example of that here. It's also can be useful for making fractals, and so here I'm just going to output a shape. Can you see my code, or should I make it bigger? It's good. Okay, cool. So here I have a shape, and then I'm going to blend the output of that with itself. So the output here is called O0. Just trust me on that, I guess. So I'm going to blend the output with itself. And we don't actually see any difference because we're drawing a triangle, and then we're mixing it with itself again, which is a triangle. But I could, after each time I mix the whole thing, repeat it, and then mix it with itself again. And so to do that with this, I could just do repeat. And we get a sort of fractal-like thing, which is something that at different scales is a repetition of itself. And it's something I'm just playing around with that's really interesting with this kind of set of abstractions, is to be able to, in only 4 functions, kind of describe a fractal. I'm going to do one more little demo. So I'm going to start with the camera again. Hi. That's my face very big. And then I'm going to blend it with the output. And then I'm going to use that modulate function that I just showed you where the colors of one thing affect the coordinates of another thing. And so here, modulate. So I get this sort of liquidy thing. I could add a little more contrast, maybe. Let's see. Maybe a little more. And so it turns out that feedback is useful for modeling things like fluid dynamics as well, because you can think of the colors of the texture as sort of a representation of pressure, and then on each loop sort of affect the system using colors. And so yeah, some things I've made, like experimenting with this, just this pretty simple setup. Also, it can be useful for creating reaction diffusion like patterns. And so one thing that the creator of that modular synthesizer that I showed at the beginning talked about, he talked about the idea of this feedback loop, which has had sometimes like a mystical implications at different moments in history. But he says the reason you put yourself in a feedback loop is so you can learn something, or rather learn to do something. You know, you do something and the results get processed somehow, perhaps just by yourself, just looking at it. And you do another thing, and the results of that get processed, and your actions can constantly be tuned or corrected or refined by what you see. And something that happens with playing with these systems that can be kind of delicate is that even though I know exactly what each function does, at the moment of playing with it, a lot of times a really unexpected thing can happen. Like in this example, if I make one of these variables just change one number, maybe it goes away now. And so it can be really delicate. And so being able to live code it, or I'm actually executing parts of the code at a time, and being able to code it, see the results, code it, see the results, to me is very similar to putting yourself in that feedback loop, which in the analog world is like patching cables together. And so part of this is that since I put this online about a year ago, a lot of people have started to use it, and I still feel like I'm learning to use it myself. And so one of the things I wanted to do is make it easy for people to share what they're doing. And so there's a Twitter bot. And basically, this is kind of, instead of having to pay for hosting and have people upload images there, basically, directly from the editor, we can upload an image to the Twitter bot. So here, and I'm going to say JSConf Hawaii. And then now it should upload what I just did to the Twitter bot. Let's see. There we are. And so what happens is when you click on a link here, then it opens the editor with the actual code that someone used to make it. And so to me, since I started making this about a year ago, it's become, now there's probably like 200 people using it. And so part of it is that the software also becomes a community, and part of it is how the things that I've been building into this software can help people share what they're doing. And so in the Twitter bot, you can also see this, what this happened came from what someone else did earlier, and this came from what someone else did earlier. This is also something I perform live with. There's a community of people who do something called live coding, which people do within the tech world, but also they do it more within the music world, which is write code in front of people to make audio visuals. And so there's a website of people who are interested in this kind of thing, of live coding as an audiovisual performance. And so, and I view some of it as sort of a direct descendant of the video synth idea of putting yourself in a feedback loop. This is one of the creators, or the first people to do live coding as a performance thing, and he had a live coding band called Slub in 2003, and said he was heavily influenced by reading Paul Klee's pedagogical sketch. I'm not going to read this whole quote, but but the idea of live coding is sort of an exploration in which you're trying something out, the computer does something, you respond, the computer does something else, and you're sharing that with the live audience. So, thank you.